Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. AQG here, and I'm back again with the Luminous Avenger X duology this time. It recently dropped, and T-Crates dropped it at the end of June, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, I actually didn't even know this was a thing, to be honest. It wasn't something I was following at all, or I had been aware of beforehand. I just found it while I was like scrolling through the Steam store. And yeah, I just found it as like a thing that dropped, and they kind of like surprised me with it, much like they did the Gunvolt trilogy, like the trio of the main games. And yeah, so I figured I'd do a video talking about these two games and the differences, much like what I did with the Gunvolt trilogy, because, you know, I love these games. I think these games are amazing. I'm really glad that even though we aren't really getting any new games at the moment, until X3 drops at least, and the new Gunvolt game drops, I'm at least happy that they're still giving these series attention and we're still getting games, even if they're just collections with a bit of extra features. So yeah, anyway, with that in mind, what we're going to be talking about today in this video is basically I'm going to be giving you my overall thoughts on the games themselves, the collection and what they added / what, you know, they improved. Is it worth it for both, like if you haven't played these games before, or if you actually have played these games before and thinking of going for the collection as well. So yeah, we're going to be covering that this video, so let's hop into it. So first things first, let's start off with a quick introduction of what these games actually are so that everyone's on the same page here. So these are the Luminous Avenger X games, like X1 and 2. They were released throughout the years. I think Luminous Avenger X1 was like not 2019, and the second game was 2022, right before Gunvolt 3 came out. And yeah, they are in the same universe as the main Gunvolt games, the mainline Gunvolt games, and but they don't follow up the story or even take place technically in the same storyline as the Gunvolt games do. So it's not like you have to play the Gunvolt games first to understand what's going to be going on here. Although it is highly advisable to. You're going to be at least, you know the characters, or some of the characters that are going to be featured in these games. They are also in the Gunvolt games, and you're going to understand how the universe works and all that. So it's advisable that you play the Gunvolt games first if you haven't played these. But if you don't care about that, these are perfectly fine 2D like platformers, side scrollers, highly action-packed, super fun games, and they don't really spoil any of the story of the Gunvolt games. So yeah. So as I'm starting off here, I wanted to just say that I did decide to go for full playthroughs on both of the games, just so I can see if, as best as I can, for any minor differences. And as far as I could see, I didn't really spot that many. I did do my research outside of that, obviously, to see if there's anything I missed. And the good thing is the changes kind of are similar between both of the games. It's kind of like how the original trilogy did it as well, where they kind of like made minor changes around and included all the DLC and all that. So I will include a section, this first section here, to talk about like the changes as a whole for both games, and then do like sections on each of the games to kind of go a bit more in detail. So the first main thing you're going to notice in this collection is that they have a new game mode for both games. It's called the Endless Battle game mode, and it comes in two varieties. Basically what it is just an infinite boss rush. If you kind of like, that's like a score attack kind of thing, where you go at it, you fight a boss, you try to beat that boss, and then you clear him and go on to the next boss, fight that boss, you clear that, and, you know, keep going about your merry way. Try to see how, you know, how big of a high score you can get. And it comes in two flavors. It has the freestyle mode, which basically you have all your equipment throughout the game, all the X weapons and all that, and all your skills equipped, so that you're kind of like overpowered, I guess, in a sense, or have all your tools at the ready and can kind of choose whatever you want to do. That's an interesting mode, I guess, but the one that I think most people are going to be attracted to is the other mode, Survival, where you actually don't have any of your EX weapon. You're kind of like base coping going into the boss fights, and you do get their EX weapons and all that after you clear them. So it's kind of like a mini roguelike in a sense, even though not really, but that's the best way I could find to describe it, where you are put up against a random boss fight, you clear that boss fight, and then you move on to the next one, you get their weapon, and then you get to pick between one of two fights after you finish each time. And you can kind of pick and choose depending on the weapons you've collected so far, and yeah. I'll talk about this point more, or this game mode more, in X2, because I feel like X2 is kind of interesting the way it's set up. So I'll get to that more when we touch on that. The second major change here is there are some minor balance adjustments throughout both games. They're very small though. I will touch upon them when I do talk about each game individually, but it's just worth mentioning right off rip now is that they kind of changed some things up a bit. Some things that weren't that powerful in the original games, they made them a bit more powerful just so that they can kind of balance out. And yeah, this is another case of X2 kind of getting a bit more here, but again, that's just the nature of X2. The game itself is kind of set up differently, so it has more to change around, I guess you could say. Anyway, I'll touch on that later. Third, full DLC integration. Just like they did with the Gunvolt trilogy, all the DLC for both games is fully included here, and I think this is, aside from the Endless Battle, one of the main selling points of this one. It's, you know, if you didn't want to buy the DLC is, especially for X2, like the DLC in both games is just a bunch of extra boss fights, but it's only one extra boss fight in X1, which I'll touch on in that section. And there are like 5 extra fights for X2, each of them costing like $2 or something, and when they go on sale they're like for $1. So yeah, if you wanted to just skip all that, buying all the DLC individually, or just waiting for it to drop on sale, you can just buy the collection and it has all the DLC included. And yeah, this was actually my first interaction with the DLC as well. I didn't really play it before, I didn't feel the need to go after it, but having the collection now and having the DLC available, I'll talk about it later, but I actually really enjoyed it. It's a bunch of just super fights, or super bosses, I guess, in a sense. And in X2's case, it's a lot of cameo fights as well, so it's pretty fun. I'll talk about that more. And the final major change is there are some performance upgrades, primarily for X1. Supports 120 FPS now, and, you know, it wasn't like that before, so yeah, that's a thing. The other thing is for other platforms, like I think for Switch 2, the quality is higher. It supports up to 4K. Or 120 FPS. If I'm not I played this on Steam, so I don't know about the Switch 2 version, but from what I understand, now it supports you can either do like a high graphics mode or a performance mode, where you either go for the FPS or the resolution. And yeah, those are the 4 primary changes that are they're technically mutual for both games. And yeah, so now we'll just talk about every game individually. Alright, so beginning with X1 here, not too much to say about this game, but like I mentioned earlier, the FPS is now supported up to 120 FPS on all consoles, and the Switch 2 edition should have 2 different versions if you want to go for the graphics or the performance. So that's great. If I'm getting any of this wrong, correct me in the comments, by the way, because I don't play it on the Switch 2. I play it on Steam, and yeah, that's what it is. So I mentioned earlier there are some balance changes, and for X1, there seems to be only one from my understanding, but I only found this out after looking it up. It's not like I really used this much. But in X1 they buffed the darkness trigger, which is one of Copen's skills that is unlocked midway through the game after the first blade battle. And basically what it is like an enhanced version of Copen, where he's kind of like, he's stronger, but the trade-off is he loses health. They kind of buffed it to where he does more damage and his health drain is slower, so that it's a more viable option. To be fair, I don't really use it that much. Like between the 2 playthroughs I did of this edition and the first, and like the original X1, I used it like 3 times. So yeah, that's a thing. That's pretty much the only balance change I've seen after doing some research. Other than that, yeah, it's basically same with X1. The only other thing is, like I mentioned earlier, the DLC integration, and by that for X1 it's only one fight. It's a blade fight, a super fight with Blade. You fight this character like multiple times throughout the story, but the DLC is like an ultimate fight versus them, and it's difficult, man. It's super hard, I can't lie. It's pretty rough. I tried it multiple times. I tried to beat it for this video. But after like losing to her ultimate move multiple times, yeah, it's it's kind of brutal, but it's pretty fun. It's in there. It's a fight that's in there. You can play it now with this DLC integrated into this collection. So yeah, that's the main change here. Other than the endless battle, the FPS supported, and finally the buff to the darkness trigger. And that's primarily it. Other than that, the game is pretty much unchanged from what I noticed. If anyone else noticed anything, feel free to let me know down in the comments. Now moving to X2. Alright, and with X2 the formula is pretty much the same. The changes are in the same areas like I mentioned. So the main things I'm going to be talking about are the balance changes to the game and the DLC. And with X2 there's a lot more to say, so let's just hop straight into it. So there are a couple of balance changes here. The first one I've noticed is that they introduced like a new spike smash system, I think it's called. It has a name and all that, but it's basically what it means is once you have 500 or more kudos, which is pretty easy to do in these games, your melee attack, the buzzsaw attack, is completely doubled in damage, and your homing shots also get a damage buff. I think this is primarily done not only to encourage like maintaining your kudos, which is kind of like the whole point of the series in general, but also to buff the melee, like the buzzsaw attack that Copen has a lot more. Because if you're not familiar with X2, this game kind of changed drastically the formula that was established for Copen before, or Akira if you're Japanese, I guess. They introduced this new buzzsaw weapon when X2 originally dropped, and it was kind of difficult to use, or kind of inconvenient to use, because you had to do a full combo and you had to come to a standstill to use it. And you know, you could technically infinitely use it, but you had to stand still in, you know, a 2D action-based like side scroller. So it wasn't super practical, but whenever you pulled it off, it was supposed to be like pretty good damage. So yeah, this now when you have 500 or more kudos, you can just completely double your damage with that whenever you do use it. The other change, and I think this is the most important change, and I'll get into it once I talk about the DLC even more, is that you get to unlock the deburst ability with one of the DLC fights. All the DLC fights give you abilities that after you clear them, you get to unlock them. They all do different things, but this one is worth talking about. It's called the deburst ability, and basically what it does is kind of gives you back Copen as he was before, technically. I don't want to get too much into the mechanics. It's supposed to be like an overview of everything, but Copen's whole thing is that he gets to dash multiple times through the air. In previous games, it kind of depended on how many bullets you have. You had a bullet gauge that you kept having to charge, but now you actually have a bullet gauge that constantly depletes as long as you don't collide with anything in midair, and you have to like keep dashing to keep your gauge maintained. And that's what X2 does, but you only get access to that once you get overdrive. That is to get over 1000 kudos, or if you get resurrected by the the game's unique anthem mechanic, or the franchise's unique anthem mechanic. This deburst ability gives you that basically instantly, so that you're kind of like back to how Copen was in like Gunvolt 2 and X1. So yeah, that's probably the most notable change. If you had trouble getting into X2 before, this might be, you might want to go for that DLC boss early and knock that out. Third is something I didn't really notice, but you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but apparently when hitting a target with your dash, you get less knockback now once you like bounce off a target and start shooting at them. So it's a bit more tighter. I didn't really notice that. I would probably have to do a side comparison. Feel free to let me know in the comments. And finally, there's a lock-on toggle now, or lock off rather. Once you dash into an enemy, you get to lock onto them, and your attacks home in on them like business as usual. But now you can apparently toggle a button to switch that lock on off in case you want to get off of whatever enemy you're currently locked onto, which is always welcome. I didn't really notice this, or I didn't really look into the options of like the the control mapping, but yeah, that is a thing in case you want to take advantage of that. So those are the 4 primary balance changes to the game. I think it's a lot more interesting, I guess I should say, than X1. I think X2 in general is a lot more interesting game. Has a lot more to talk about. So yeah, that's the first half of it. The other big thing to talk about here is the DLC in X2, and this is my opinion the biggest selling point of the game, because there are 5 unique fights in this game that were released as DLC, and they're all included if you just buy the package. So this is the big selling point here. If you include the extra boss fight in X1, that's 6 new boss fights if you have never played the DLC before. So yeah, they're all pretty unique fights that all have their own gimmicks and mechanics. And since these 5 fights are in particular are like cameos of other games, like some Inti Creates games, some games that I honestly didn't even know existed before making this video, so that's very interesting. Starting off with Kohaku Otori from a game called Kogen Sword of Rewind, which it was developed by Hardlight Games, which is interesting. And I think it was also co-developed by Inti Creates. I'm not sure on that. This is what my research is telling me, so feel free to correct me in the comments. Second fight is Yang Yumo from Dusk Driver 2, another game I had no idea existed. But this seems to be, like, Inti Creates seems to have no hand in this one. I think they just got licensing for the character to put her in as a boss fight. It's interesting, though, for this fight because I'm playing the game on the English dub, but the character seems to be speaking some sort of Chinese. If I had to tell from, like, the general accent, I guess, and the sound. It's very odd because it's not even Japanese. It seems to be Chinese. So I don't know why they're, if you know anything about this, feel free to let me know in the comments. And this is the interesting one because this is the fight that unlocks the D-Burst ability. So if you want to play Copen like he plays in the original games, this is the closest you'll get if you go for this fight early on, which again, they're DLC fights, they're unlocked at the beginning of the game. You just do this the first thing and play the rest of the game, with the D-Burst ability. Third fight is Jason Frudnick, which is, Blaster Master. This is classic Inti Creates right here. Fun fact, I actually never played any of the Blaster Master games. I never really had too much of an interest, but I heard nothing but good things about them. So to see the cameo here, and I think if you're a fan of those games and you play this fight, you're going to notice a lot of cameos from the games themselves. So very cool. Fourth fight is Corona from the Galgun games. It's a duology of games that they also released. And pretty fun fight as well, pretty devious. This is, I think, the only fight in the game where the boss attacks you before, like, the boss fight technically begins. And finally, the fifth fight is Kirin from Azure Striker Gunvolt 3. This is the main character of the third game. And yeah, pretty cool fight as well. It's kind of tied interestingly, because as a fan of Azure Striker Gunvolt 3, it's kind of like there's a bit of lore to the fight, and Kirin kind of gets into it before you start off the fight. I think it's pretty interesting. It kind of ties into Azure Striker Gunvolt 3 because in that game as well, by the way, you had a bunch of like alternate universe fights that you had to fulfill specific conditions to get to, and I thought that was pretty cool that they tied that into this, but this time you're playing as Copen. Yeah, so those are the 5 fights. They, again, are all their own thing with interesting mechanics. Some of them have weaknesses, some of them don't. You kind of experiment for yourself and see how you can approach these fights. Another cool thing, this isn't really about the fights themselves, but about how X2 is structured in general. You kind of get a bit more bang for your buck, at least in my experience here, because X2 is a game that has standard mode, like normal mode, which is pretty easy. It's meant to like get people in, and you can eventually unlock a hard mode. And that means that there are 2 different versions of each boss fight, and this includes these 5 fights right here, which we're probably gonna feature new attack patterns and all that in the harder versions of themselves. I can only confirm this because I didn't go for a hard playthrough on for this video. I figured I'd just do the standard run and do the hard mode on my own, because it'll take a while. The hard mode is, surprisingly pretty difficult, shocker. But yeah, so these fights, boss fights usually, have more attacks and are more difficult to take down in hard mode. So you technically have 2 versions of each of these fights if you want to play the easy mode versions and, get used to their basic attack patterns, and then jump into the hard mode versions. If you run into any of these boss fights, or any boss fights in general, in the endless battle mode, by the way, for X2, you're playing against the hard mode variants, if I'm not mistaken. I tested this out a bit, and it seemed to be all hard mode difficulty for the boss fights in Endless Battle. And yeah, that's kind of all I really have to say about the DLC. I think, again, this is, to reiterate here, this is the main selling point of X2. 5 unique fights, all of them are cameos from different games, 3 of which are from Gunvolt, Inti Creates properties. So, yeah, I think a really cool feature here, really cool add-on. Other than that, there isn't much else about X2 to say, really. I think from my playthrough, I noticed the game is very much the same as it was before, other than the balance changes here and the DLC. And yeah, those are basically the major things I wanted to mention about the collection here. I think the video came out overall a lot longer than the Gunvolt video. I kind of didn't want that, to be honest. I wanted it to be a bit more concise, but I did try to do my research a bit more for this one, because in like covering the Gunvolt trilogy, I did notice that like in the comments a lot of people were correcting me on things, so I tried to do my research a bit better here. Obviously I'm never going to be perfect with these things. I know these games are a lot more nuanced and have a lot more like minor details that I'm not aware of. And yeah, everyone's always like in the comments correcting me. I do appreciate it, but I did try a bit better here to, you know, get everything lined up a bit better. And yeah, as for what I recommended, honestly, this one I'm a lot more leaning towards a yes than in the enhanced, like the trilogy, because not only did the trilogy launch with some issues with like Gunvolt 1 not launching and all that, and Gunvolt 3 having random like frame drops, I don't know why. This one has like nothing negative about it really. It's like I bought the collection. It's has all the add-ons I talked about. The games are super fun to play in general, like with or without the collection. And now you get all the DLC and all these other bonuses. So I'd recommend it. If you already have the games, I'd recommend waiting for a sale. I don't know if you want to buy this at full price, but you know, up to you, like how interested you are in it. If you haven't played the games, this is definitely the ideal way to play them. But if you haven't played any of the Gunvolt games in general, I would recommend playing the Trilogy Enhanced first over this collection, because you know those are the main Gunvolt games. Especially Gunvolt 1 and 2 are gonna get you, you know, acquainted with the universe and the characters and the playstyles and all that. And then you can play the X games, which in this duology, there are side stories. They don't really have anything to do with the main Gunvolt games at all, but you know, helps to start with from the beginning. If you're interested in the X, like in Copen's gameplay specifically, then I guess yeah, go for this first. Again, you can't go wrong here. All of these are like amazing 2D platformers. They're super fun. It's brilliant homage to the Mega Man franchise. I'm really happy to see how far this franchise came. And yeah, we're getting X3 soon. I'm not fully up to date with that, but I am excited for it. I'll probably be playing it when it launches, and I might even try to drop a review of it, or like review the other games in anticipation for it. Who really knows? But yeah, with all that said, I feel like I'm doing a bit of yapping here, but yeah, I figured I'd get my thoughts out. Thanks so much for watching, and take care.